What have you seen so far from this team besides just like are they still the top ranked defense in the league?
No, they dropped. I think they're. I looked this up before. I think they're fourth now, but I mean they're a few percentage points behind. Yeah,
it's them, Boston, Minnesota, right? They're all kind of in that.
Yeah, New York snuck in slightly above the Magic, but yeah, it goes T-Wolves, Celtics, Knicks, Magic.
Yep.
So who's been the guy this year? Is it Franz or Paolo?
It's kind of weird. I mean, Paolo got off to a weird start this season, and I thought he was. It was a couple things. I didn't know if he was being too passive, and just trying to kind of like let the game come to him and not necessarily just like taking over, which I think is admirable, but also sometimes I think that's what the team needs. And then on the other hand, I was like, I just don't know that they have enough shooting to like actually properly space him out and like give him the ability to operate on the block and like kind of find space and get to the hoop and get to the foul line. And then like after like 5 games or so, like he just kind of clicked, and I think he just said, screw it. Like, I'm just going to kind of like be me and end up, attacking the basket more. I mean, he's been an incredible 3-point. He's the Magic best 3-point shooter this year, which is kind of mind blowing, because one of the things that, was a question about him was like whether or not he was going to be an insufficient jump shooter. And he has not been an insufficient 3-point shooter at all this year. He's shooting, I think, so, well above 40%. I think Franz is slightly better right now. And this has always been the thing, is like, I've not shut the door on who's on Franz being like the guy long term. Like, I still think that's realistic. I think it's more likely that Paolo is the guy long term, but I still think Franz can be it. But I think when Franz is good, Paolo's typically good like night in, night out. Like, he's going to give you what his numbers are, and he's just that skilled. When Franz like really like is on, they're tough to beat. They're a really hard team to beat overall. So I think he's kind of the difference maker, and he's been the guy that's kind of the linchpin for basically whether or not this team goes or not. And the 9-game winning streak that got snapped the other night, like, he's been playing out of his mind. Like, he had like 4 straight 30-point games. Mm-hmm. He was shooting like 70% from the field, well over 60% from 3. Like, it was absurd, like absurd numbers. And that's not who he is like 82 games a year, but that's who he can be. And I think he could be a more efficient player than Paolo. So I think it's a lame answer, but it's like a combination of both. Honestly, the difference has been Jalen Suggs. Like, if you're going to ask me, like, of all guys on the roster, like Suggs.
You mean the new Marcus Smart?
I think he's potentially a better shooter now than Marcus Smart. Who knows?
Yeah,
I think, and he's also a little bit more likable, I think, than Marcus Smart at times. But I think he to me is the difference in this team last year versus this year. Like, they actually have like a legit number 3 guy.
Wow, number 3 guy. I've tuned in to see Suggs a little bit. I'm a big Jalen Suggs guy. Back in college, Will, you can attest to this. I was ready to trade it off for Jalen Suggs. I think I even advocated for trading Marcus Smart to try and get a chance to get Jalen Suggs. Suggs actually reminds me a little bit more of Caruso than Smart, or like a combination of the two of them, just like body type and all that. But I do think, with going back to the Franz Paolo thing, Franz appears to me from a very outside perspective to have less of that like alpha dog ego. He seems more of the connector, facilitator type. So I think it actually makes a lot more sense. Whereas you compare that to Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, where they're both a little bit, alpha doggy in the way that they play. And, I think that's why there's
feels like Jalen's more though. Like, I think sometimes when I watch the Celtics, like Jalen, even if I don't want him to be that guy, he's that guy, and I think he has some of that more than Tatum does. Like Tatum, I know he'll drop like, what is it, like 40, 50 or whatever in a playoff win. But there's times when like he kind of just like disappears a little bit too, whereas like I kind of always know that Jalen's going to do something, whether it's good or bad. Like, he's always going to be there. Whereas like sometimes I think that's the difference between Tatum and like the real upper echelon of players, is just like, not that he doesn't have the mindset, but like sometimes he just kind of coasts and disappears in games. And at least Jaylen Brown is like, I always kind of know what I'm getting with Jaylen Brown.
Yeah, he does. Jalen does not coast. That's for sure.
Yeah. So but while we're talking about the Celtics, I want to talk a little bit about, I mentioned it. They beat the Celtics 4 straight times, right? They feel like they are
a bad matchup.
Yeah. They feel like the Celtics kryptonite. So, I'm curious, other than, Cole Anthony the other day saying that they're just amped up because of some ridiculous comment Eddie House made.
I was going to say the Eddie House factor cannot be overlooked.
Yeah. Him calling them the goofy club for getting excited about wins a couple of years ago in December. What do you see as their secret to why they're such a bad matchup for the Celtics?
Because they're gigantic. Like, I think they just, if you can, specifically that last game, I mean, they're bringing Jonathan Isaac off the bench to just say, "Hey, go make Tatum's life miserable." And he, this is what's crazy about this Magic sort of turnaround is, 3-4 years ago, we were looking at Jonathan Isaac as like the hope of the franchise. Like he was the guy, like we were hoping could turn into a star. And that was obviously incredibly unrealistic. Then he gets hurt and then he does all the off the court stuff, which we don't even need to get into. But if you're just asking him to be like the 5th or 6th best player on a team and just be an absolute insane defensive player, that's like a cheat code, like that. And he's like hitting shots too. And that's why I just never gave up on him because he's not making like a ton of money. I don't know what his trade value necessarily is. So I was like, I think this guy has legit all NBA defensive potential. Why would you just give up on that guy as like a role player? That's insane to me. So I think the size is just for most teams, like they're just, I mean, if you look at it, they go, if they're all healthy, like Wendell Carter Jr., 6'10", guy can step out and hit threes, play make a little bit as a center. Paulo, Franz, both 6'10", both guys can have the ball, move it, pass, whatever, play defense. And then, the backcourt is a little bit smaller, but if you switch things up and you like throw Joe Ingles in there, who's like I know he's older, but he's a big body. Jalen Suggs is small, but he plays like he's gigantic. And then, like I said, you got the bench, Jonathan Isaac off the bench. You've got, Mo Wagner. You've got Bataze, who's been like kind of like a menace defensively as well. They're just way bigger and more athletic than a lot of these teams. And while they don't necessarily have Jalen and Tatum just yet, they have like 4, 5, 6, 7 guys deep who are all just absolute monsters on the court. So I think that's the biggest problem. And I think Porzingis solved some of that. Obviously, he got hurt in that game too, which I texted Bill, I think, during that game. I was like, as soon as Porzingis went out, it's like a layup line for the Celtics or for the Magic in that game. So I think that's it. Like that, we talk about these like rebuilds and, the future of the NBA. And, a lot of people talk about OKC. And I think the Magic have that, but they're just big. They're even bigger than OKC. So that's why I just think their roster and what their prototypes are for their stars is the future of the league. It's 6'10" guys who can handle and basically defend and do everything you want on the court.
I'm not kidding when I say this. I think that when the Celtics lost all those games to the Magic last year, they realized that they were too small and that the Magic were going to be a problem. And I think that's why they went out and got Porzingis. I don't know, like Porzingis obviously being 7'3" is like the upper echelon of the size in the league. Yeah. But I knew that, after that, they were like, we need to make some sort of change. We're too small going Marcus Smart, Derek White, Tatum, Brown, and Horford, right? That's just not big enough. Even Rob Williams, 6'8", 6'9". He's not like a huge dude.
And he's always hurt. So yeah.
And he's always hurt, unfortunately this year he got hurt again. And that's really why I think they got Porzingis, is because of teams like the Magic. And then obviously the MVP of the league, Joel Embiid still being in the East, Giannis, and then Jokic on the other side. You're going to have to match up with them at some point. I don't know if Porzingis is the answer to match up with any of the behemoths, but just in general, being bigger on the court, I think it was huge to have another big to pair with Horford that theoretically would work with them. But yeah, I agree with you, dude.
Even real quick, like that was before Drew Holiday became available. That was always the plan, right? Like, let's go get, bigger. For all of those reasons that you just laid out. And then we kind of reverse course a little bit with the Drew Holiday trade and moving Rob out, just because it was, it was unexpected that Drew Holiday was going to be there.
That's 100% the right move, obviously. Yeah.
It definitely is. But then it leaves us still a little bit more vulnerable to situations like the Magic because we don't have Grant and Rob to go along with the KP and Al Horford combination.
Yeah, I love the Porzingis trade. I know like people, obviously I didn't have any like emotional attachment to Marcus Smart, so I just look at him purely as an asset, and I'm like, I kind of think you probably got the best out of Marcus Smart, and I think we've seen that. And yeah, there are certainly risks with getting Porzingis, but I just like to me, Porzingis is an infinitely more valuable player like this year if he's healthy than Marcus Smart would be for the Celtics. So I love that trade for you guys.